I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby here with Emmy winner Jodie Comer, who stars in The Last Duel. And just to start, this is such a fascinating character, Marguerite. This is based on a true story.
Mhm.
Did you find it necessary or helpful to do research on your own to get into the mindset of playing her, or was it all just there in the script?
No, research was definitely important. I mean, the first thing I did was I bought the book. I didn't
Hmm.
have the script when I initially met Ridley. So I was like, what is this about? But it really struck me, there was so little information actually about her. So what my, when I kind of understood what had happened to her, a lot of it was about really doing research of that time and what women were up against of that time, which made it all the more extraordinary, made her actions all the more extraordinary, when you realize just what she was up against and speaking out in the way that she did. Um, so that's what a lot of it was about. Working closely with Nicole, we kind of clung to the information that we did have and the various things written about her in the book. But that's what really kind of compelled me to want to be a part of the production, was understanding the team's incentive and their want to give her opportunity to tell her side of the story and hopefully give her some sense of justice, you know.
Yeah, and speaking of sides of the story here, this is the kind of story that I could imagine would be exciting from an acting perspective because
Mm,
it's split into three parts, each of them centering on a different character and their
mm,
perspective. And your section is the last one, it's the most authentic to Marguerite. But we sort of
mm.
see her in a slightly different light in the first two sections. And some of that I think is just editing. But how much were you encouraged to make those different choices for each of those three sections here?
Oh yeah, I mean, really kind of gave me the reins. I think what was um what was the thing that we were always really just making sure of was like how far we push it. We never wanted the kind of changes to be obvious. Um, because in the script, and what I thought was so kind of beautiful and clever about the writing was that each perspective, the dialogue didn't change at all. So I knew everything was going to be kind of performance led in that sense. Um, but I was really encouraged to play around with that. Which is interesting because usually, when you join a project, 9 times out of 10, you're playing one character and you know your instincts. And it's no concern of yours really what another character needs from you. Whereas when we were playing around with these perspectives, I was always having to think of, okay, what does Carouge think of me as a woman, as a wife? In his head, how did this play out? What can I kind of provide him in this moment? Um, and it was helpful for me, especially with the trickier scenes. In regards to the rape, we shot Marguerite's perspective first, which was great because I felt secure in knowing that we'd established the truth, and then I felt free to then figure out where we could go from there. And it was helpful also because when you think of the moment before the rape in the hallway, it's quite a long sequence. And she's very clearly saying no. She's very very clearly backing away. So once we'd shot that, we then had to think about, right, okay, now how can we possibly make this seem like some sort of invitation? Um, so I was very lucky that I was working with incredible actors, but also like Ridley is so confident and so sure of himself and what he's captured and what he wants. Um, so a lot of it was, me being free to do what I was doing and then kind of look to him and be like, like, is that it? Like, so it's great when you kind of have that trust in a director, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I'm also wondering, about how you developed relationships with Matt Damon and Adam
Mm.
Driver, your co-stars, because this is a film where there's a lot of tension between the three of your characters. And how much were you able to spend time developing the connection with them, or did you sort of want to be like more method about it and sort of keep your distance?
No, no, not
Okay.
at all. Not at all. I'm very much like, once we call it cut, I'm definitely back to Jodie.
Mm,
And they're just really lovely, lovely guys. So I met Matt first, because he of course wrote it with Nicole, and Ben, and they really involved me very early on when they were doing script meetings and stuff, and were asking my thoughts and if there was anything I didn't feel was quite right or anything I wanted to kind of contribute. So um they were just great and super respectful. I had a lot of difficult scenes with Adam, and we got on very well, and it was very clear, kind of, if anyone's uncomfortable, you speak out, it's fine. And they're funny. Like, there was a lot of giggles sometimes, especially when we had this scene where we had to do the kiss from three perspectives,
mhm.
and we all kind of lost our minds a little bit. So it was nice to have those moments of relief, in between the material itself. But yeah, it was such a great casting crew all around.
Yeah, that reminds me of when people on The Handmaid's Tale have said similar things of how dark that show can be, and then you have to have those lighter moments of when you let
Yeah,
go. Yeah.
definitely.
And speaking of this great cast, you'd share a few really standout scenes with Dame Harriet Walter,
I
um,
do.
playing your mother-in-law, which is of note for people who watch Killing Eve. She was in the third season with you.
Yes.
How would you describe just working with an actress of her stature, especially on these two very different projects here?
Yeah. What I love about Harriet is, she doesn't take herself seriously at all. She's the most wonderful actress. She's done the most incredible work. Um, and yet she's the first one to be giggling on set, or making a joke out of herself, or she feels like a friend, um, which is so wonderful. And I think that's what I love most about Harriet, is I get to do these incredible scenes with her, and act alongside her, but then we have so much fun when the cameras aren't rolling. She's incredibly generous, um, and just wonderful. It's funny because I say the same about Fiona Shaw, and I feel like they're very similar in that sense of, they're so crazy talented, and it just kind of goes right over their heads. They don't take themselves seriously, which I really love. Mm.
Yeah, I think maybe for people who only know you from Killing Eve, they may be
Mm.
surprised to see you also excelling in this more introverted kind of character, where Villanelle is such a larger than life character.
In your
And maybe you
face.
could see, yeah, maybe you could see some overlaps between the two of them, but having inhabited them, um, could you speak to what are the more challenging aspects of playing a more interior character
Mm.
versus like extroverted type?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, it's funny because I feel like the challenge with Villanelle is like treading the line, is never wanting her to become a caricature, like always making sure that however outrageous the moment is, that it's always coming from some sense of truth. Whereas with Marguerite, that's the only place I was coming from. I guess it's just everything's felt a bit more subtle in a way. And when I read, The Last Duel, and was reading about her, I was so moved by her and her courage, and just really wanting, I felt like I had a real duty of care when approaching this story. Um, so that was kind of always at the forefront of my mind, but also wanting to, make sure that she was like a fully fleshed human, and trying to get in little moments. Like, I remember when there's a scene where Carrouges is going to Paris, and she's like, "Oh no, please stay," and in his version, you know, she's like, please, like, don't leave me. And then I remember we were doing Marguerite's version, and I was like, oh, how do I try and make this different, you know? And I remember just doing it in a way that she was like, please stay, like, please go, like, just trying to find little quirks of giving her a personality, and um which sounds so simple, but I feel like when we look at women in history, especially of that time, like, I think we we erase all these complexities from them, because they lived in a different way. But you know, you see how Marguerite stood up for herself, and you know, we see that in women today who experience the same thing. And that's what we really wanted to portray and make sure was like present in the film.
Yeah. And
Mm,
just talking about the more difficult scenes here, there's also a scene towards the end where Marguerite is defending herself and she's being doubted by almost everyone around
mm.
her. And, you know, you're in tears, you're shaking, it's incredibly raw. And I was just wondering in that scene how you summon up the strength to film a scene of that nature, which is so uncomfortable. I mean, like I've talked with actors who say like the body doesn't always know that it's make believe sometimes, so it can really affect you
Mm,
on
mm.
a real level. Can you talk about just the specifics of getting a handle on like that scene and how you navigate getting there?
Yeah. Well, what was so kind of remarkable about that experience was like the way Ridley shoots. He has 4 to 5 cameras rolling at any given time. So it's like incredibly immersive. And I
Hmm.
think when the take got cut, but the takes were like 9 minutes long. Like it almost felt like a play in a way. Um, and Ridley, Adam, and I got together the evening before we were shooting these scenes. These scenes were at the end of the shoot. We'd also stopped for 6 months because of COVID, so it was a
Yeah.
long time to really think about the weight of what we had to do. But we got together on the set in the studio, um, and we just blocked it out physically, but very minimal, like literally just marks where we felt we may move, where we may end up. And then the next morning when we got to set, everything was ready to shoot. Um, and we were kind of just left to do it. Um, and it's funny because I think a scene like that, you just have to surrender. Um, you know, me and Adam had a great relationship. It was very clear if anyone was uncomfortable, we would say. Um, but I think you know, when you're working alongside someone who's willing to be like as present, as vulnerable, um, it just kind of happens, you know. And a lot of the time, you don't really know what is going on. And you know, there was a lot of energy and there's a lot of movement, and the crew were phenomenal. Like I remember when Ridley would shout cut, everyone would literally drop whatever it was they were holding and exit the room, and Ridley would come in and we'd just sit there for a couple of minutes and, you know, kind of compose ourselves and, you know, try and figure out what it was that we found, if there was anything that didn't feel right or we wanted to push a little bit more. Um, and it's funny because I feel like those scenes challenge you the most personally, because I feel like I came away from that experience and being like, wow, I wasn't quite aware how deep we were gonna go there. You know, I think sometimes you can be kind of shocked in um about what it is that you find. But I think it's also because it was such a safe space, you know, that it was set up and it was left for us both to just be and figure it out. And then so we shot Marguerite's version first, and then we shot Legree's, and again just to really try and figure out how we could manipulate the scene to make these movements somehow feel like an invitation. Um, so yeah, and also in answer to your question, I think it's funny. I definitely became aware in that job, like you have to have something when you go home to like wash the day away. Might be a hot bath. We were filming in Dorky in Ireland, which is just south of Dublin, um, and the sea is freezing there, but it's beautiful. So I would like when I'd done filming, I would go and jump in the sea, and that was my kind of like um just
Cleansing.
washing it away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like I feel like you just need like a little ritual of going, okay, I'm gonna step away from this now. Um, but yeah.
Wow. That it sounds like it was maybe more difficult than other roles possibly to wash things off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you also, there's also, that there are going to be many people who watch this film who can relate to this in some way. So you want to make sure that it's serving the character, it's not gratuitous, that, you're telling the story, but you're handling it with sensitivity, So there's all of those things. But I think ultimately when you get to set on that day, you just have to focus on the character and what is going on. I was really happy with the decision that was made about in her version, the truth. You're in on, you're with her so intimately, which is almost more painful, because you're reliving it with her. But yeah.
Yeah, well, speaking of letting things go, as we're almost out of time here, there is a number of Killing Eve fans who I'm sure are wanting to know anything about this final season, which is coming next year. I imagine there's not a whole lot you can say about it, right? But in general terms, I'm curious if you can just speak to how much this season maybe has felt different in a way, in the sense of knowing that the ending is coming.
Yeah, well, it's bittersweet in that way, because it's like, okay, we know this is the end, so now hopefully we can aim towards something that is really fulfilling for us creating it and also the people watching it. Um, it was amazing. I will say, the one thing I will say is that this season may have the best Villanelle disguise to date.
Oh
And
my
that's all I'm
God.
going to say. I may
Wow.
have already said too much, which that was like nothing, but is a lot. But yeah, it was wonderful, and we were Sandra and I were together, on the final day, and it was just like it's just so crazy to think that we started this, like 4 or 5 years ago, and the journey kind of being over. But yeah, I hope people enjoy it. I really, really do. The fans are
Nice.
great.
Excellent. Well, for those of you watching, subscribe for more interviews and go to goldderby.com to make your Oscar predictions. Thank you so much, Jodie. It was great getting to
Thank
talk with you.
you. You too. Take care.